Part 1. The Impossible Problem. The Great Hall of the Galactic Union had never been so quiet. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated areas, each shaped to fit their unique bodies. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some had 6 legs, others floated in anti-gravity fields. But today, every single one of them shared the same emotion: fear. On the massive screen at the center of the hall, a simulation played on repeat. A neutron star, dense enough to crush planets, was moving through space at terrible speed. Its path would take it directly through the Vela system in 18 months. 4 worlds, 3 billion lives. And according to every calculation, every simulation, every scientific model, there was nothing anyone could do. High Chancellor, who existed as a cloud of conscious gas contained in a specialized suit, spoke first. His voice echoed through translation devices in every language known to the Union. We have run the simulations 10,000 times. The result is always the same. We cannot move the neutron star. We cannot destroy it. We cannot evacuate more than 12% of the population in time. He paused, and his form flickered with grief. We must accept this truth. The hall erupted in arguments. The crystalline blamed the for not detecting the danger sooner. The accused everyone of giving up too easily. Species that had been allies for now pointed fingers at each other, their fear turning into anger. Ambassador sat in the human section, watching the chaos. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes. Beside her sat her aide, a young man named who looked increasingly distressed. Ambassador whispered, "They're talking about choosing which cities to save, which people deserve to live and which ones." He couldn't finish. Placed a hand on his arm. "I know." She had been humanity's voice in this council for 15 years. She had learned how aliens thought, how they calculated, how they made decisions. They were not cruel. They were simply old. Their civilizations had existed for hundreds of thousands of years. They had learned to accept limits. They had learned that some problems could not be solved. Humans had not learned this lesson. Stood up. The movement was so small, so simple, that it took a moment for anyone to notice. But slowly, the arguing stopped. Eyes and sensors and other perception organs turned toward the human section. "The Union recognizes Ambassador of Earth," the Chancellor said, surprise evident in his voice. Walked to the center platform. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. She looked around at the assembled species, beings who had traveled between stars when humans were still living in caves, beings with technology that seemed like magic, beings who had already accepted that 3 billion people would die. She spoke 4 words. "We've got this." The silence stretched for 3 long seconds. Then came the laughter. Not cruel laughter, not mocking. It was the sad, pitying sound of adults watching a child promise to catch the moon. A representative, her crystalline body chiming softly, spoke with what she clearly thought was kindness. "Ambassador, we appreciate your species' spirit, but this is not a matter of courage. This is physics. The energy required to affect a neutron star exceeds everything our civilizations have produced in our entire histories, combined." "I understand," said, "we've done the math too." "Then you know this is impossible." "I know that you think it's impossible," smiled. "Humans think differently." The High Chancellor leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Give us a chance, 18 months, let us try." "And when you fail?" "Then you lose nothing. You're already planning for everyone to die. Let us try to change that." The council debated for 6 hours. In the end, they agreed, not because they believed humans could succeed, but because refusing would seem cruel. Let the young species have their hope, they thought. Let them learn the hard lesson that the universe sometimes simply says no. Far from the Great Hall, on a space station orbiting Mars, Captain Park received a message marked with the highest priority. He read it 3 times before he believed it. Was 52 years old, with a weathered face and hands that had repaired more engines than he could count. He had commanded the deep space vessel Defiance for 12 years. His crew trusted him with their lives because he had never, not once, asked them to do something he wouldn't do himself. He called his chief engineer. Dr. Lee appeared on his screen, her hair messy and her eyes bright with the particular madness of someone who had been awake for too long. "Captain, I assume you got the message too. They want us to save 3 billion people from a neutron star." "Yes." "The entire Galactic Union says it's impossible." "Yes." Studied her face. "You don't think it's impossible?" Grinned. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting her whole life for a problem worthy of her mind. "Captain, I've been working on something. The Union scientists called it creative nonsense. They said it violated 6 fundamental laws of physics." "Does it?" "No, it just uses those laws in ways they never imagined." She pulled up a holographic display, equations floating in the air between them. "We can't move the neutron star. We can't destroy it, but we can fold space around it, make it skip over the Vela system entirely, like a stone skipping over water." "How much energy would that take?" "Almost none. That's the beautiful part. We're not using force, we're using precision, like threading a needle instead of breaking down a wall." Was quiet for a long moment. He thought about his crew. He thought about his family back on Earth. He thought about 3 billion people on 4 worlds who were being told to accept their deaths. "What do you need?" "Ships, lots of them, each one positioned at exact coordinates. The margin for error is," she hesitated, "small." "How small?" 10 meters. "Across how much space?" 40,000 kilometers. Let out a long breath. That was like asking someone to place a grain of sand on a specific spot in an ocean while blindfolded during a hurricane. And if someone is out of position, the field collapses, everyone dies, the neutron star continues on its path. He should have said no. Any reasonable person would have said no. The odds were impossible, the risks unthinkable, the consequences of failure absolute. But Park was human, and humans had never let impossible stop them before. "Start making calls," he said. "I want every ship that can fly and every captain brave enough to try. We've got 18 months to do the impossible." He ended the call and looked out his window at the stars. Somewhere out there, 3 billion people were waiting for someone to save them. The Galactic Union had given up. Humanity was just getting started. Part 2, The Human Way. The Defiance cut through the darkness of space like a knife through silk. It was not the biggest ship in the human fleet, nor the fastest, but it was reliable, and its crew was the best Captain Park had ever served with. In the ship's medical bay, Chief Medic checked the health readings of every crew member. She was a woman of 45, with steady hands and a gentle voice that could calm even the most frightened patient. These days, she was seeing a lot of fear. "Captain," she said during their morning briefing, "the crew is showing signs of stress, elevated heart rates, trouble sleeping. Some of them are having nightmares." "Are they fit for duty?" "For now, but this mission," she shook her head. "They know what's at stake, they know what happens if we fail." Nodded slowly. "Keep monitoring them. If anyone needs to talk, make sure they know your door is open." "Always is, Captain." On the bridge, Lieutenant was coordinating with the growing fleet. He was young, only 28, but he had a gift for organization that made him invaluable. His screens showed 200 ships converging from across human space. "Status report," said as he entered the bridge. Pulled up the display. 212 ships confirmed, sir. Every colony has sent what they can spare. Some of these vessels are 50 years old. A few are held together with hope and welding tape. "Weapons?" "Minimal. This isn't a combat fleet. These are cargo ships, research vessels, passenger transports. The crews are scientists, traders, miners." Paused. Volunteers, sir, every single one. Felt something warm in his chest. He had called for help, and humanity had answered. Not because they were ordered to, not because they would be rewarded, simply because people needed saving, and humans did not abandon people who needed saving. "What about the Union observers?" he asked. 12 ships, various species. They're keeping their distance but matching our course." His expression darkened slightly. "Their communications aren't encrypted very well. I've seen some of the messages. And they're taking bets on when we'll give up. The most popular prediction is 2 months." Almost smiled. Let them watch, let them learn. In her laboratory, Dr. Lee was surrounded by holographic equations that twisted and folded in ways that made the eyes hurt. Her assistant, Doctor, worked beside her, checking calculations for the 100th time. Was young and brilliant, best student from the academy. She had volunteered for this mission within minutes of hearing about it. "The spatial geometry is holding," reported, "but the precision requirements are." She trailed off, staring at the numbers. "Impossible?" asked amusement in her voice. "I was going to say challenging." "Same thing to most people." Stretched, her back popping after hours of hunching over displays. "The Union scientists don't believe we can do this because they rely entirely on computers. Their systems are better than ours, faster, more accurate, but they're still machines. They can't adapt in real time to unexpected variables. And humans can. Humans are the most adaptable creatures in the known galaxy. Our brains evolved to recognize patterns, to make split-second decisions based on incomplete information. It's why we survived on Earth when bigger, stronger animals didn't." Pointed at the swirling equations. "Each ship captain will need to make micro-adjustments during the final sequence. Not big changes, tiny ones. A meter here, half a meter there. But those adjustments will need to happen faster than any computer can calculate." Looked worried. "You're asking them to trust their instincts with the lives of 3 billion people." "I'm asking them to be human." 3 days later, the alien observer ship Crystalline Dream requested permission to approach the Defiance. Captain granted it. The ambassador, a being whose name translated roughly as morning light, came aboard alone. Her body was made of living crystal, beautiful and strange, and she moved with a grace that seemed almost musical. Met her in the ship's observation lounge. Through the windows, the stars burned cold and distant. "Captain Park," Morning Light said, her voice like wind chimes, "I hope you will forgive my directness. I prefer it. Why are you doing this?" Considered the question. He had been asked this many times in the past weeks, by his crew, by his family, by reporters from Earth who wanted to understand why humans were risking so much for people they had never met. "Do you know the Vela system?" he asked instead of answering. "I have studied it, 4 worlds, various species, 3 billion inhabitants, primarily and with smaller populations of and others." "Do you know any of them, personally?" Morning Light's crystal form flickered. "No." "Neither do I." Turned to look at the stars. "I've never been to Vela. I've never met anyone from those worlds. If they all died tomorrow, my life would continue unchanged. My family would be safe. My home would be untouched." "Then why?" "Because they're counting on someone to try." He faced her again. "Your people have been traveling the stars for 100,000 years. You've seen civilizations rise and fall. You've learned to accept loss. But we haven't. Humans are still young. We still believe that every life matters, that giving up is never acceptable. Even when the mathematics say you cannot win." "Especially then," smiled. "The mathematics told us we couldn't leave Earth. We left anyway. The mathematics told us we couldn't survive on Mars. We live there now. The mathematics told us we couldn't reach the stars." He gestured at the window, at the ships visible in the distance. "And yet here we are." Morning Light was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "My people find humans confusing. You are so young, so limited in your technology, so brief in your individual lives, and yet you attempt things that we would never dare. Maybe that's exactly why, said. Our lives are short. We don't have time to accept limits. We have to push against them always because if we don't, we'll never know what we might have achieved. The ambassador left the Defiance that day with more questions than answers. But something had changed in the way she looked at the human fleet, not with pity anymore, but with something closer to wonder. In the days that followed, the fleet continued to grow. Ships arrived from Earth, Mars, Europa, Titan, and a dozen colonies scattered across human space. Scientists, engineers, pilots, and ordinary people who simply wanted to help. Dr. Lee worked without sleep, refining her equations. Lieutenant coordinated positions with a patience that seemed superhuman. Chief Medic kept the crew healthy, and Captain Park watched over them all, the weight of 3 billion lives resting on his shoulders. The impossible waited ahead, and humanity flew toward it without hesitation. Part 3: The Attempt. The neutron star had no name. It was simply a number in a catalog, a dense ball of matter so heavy that a spoonful would weigh more than a mountain. It moved through the darkness at a speed that made it invisible to the naked eye, leaving only distortions in space where it passed. 200 human ships surrounded it in a perfect sphere 40,000 kilometers wide. They held their positions with an accuracy that the alien observers found impossible. Their instruments showed fluctuations of mere meters, sometimes centimeters, as pilots made constant tiny adjustments. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Park watched the countdown timer. 6 hours until the attempt. His hands were steady, but his heart beat faster than usual. Report from Dr. Lee, Lieutenant announced. His face was pale. She says the calculations are complete. Final positions have been transmitted to all ships. What's her confidence level? Hesitated. She said 87%. 87%. That meant a 13% chance of failure. A 13% chance that every ship in the fleet would be destroyed and 3 billion people would die anyway. In her laboratory, Dr. Lee stared at numbers that blurred before her exhausted eyes. She had not slept in 6 days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the equations moving, shifting, demanding her attention. Chief Medic found her collapsed over her console at hour -5. His voice was firm. You need to rest. Can't. The calculations. We'll still be there in 4 hours, but if you make a mistake because you're exhausted, everyone dies. Took her arm. 4 hours sleep. That's an order from your doctor. Wanted to argue, but's eyes allowed no argument, and her own body was failing. She let herself be led to a bed and fell asleep before her head touched the pillow. She woke 3.5 hours later to alarms. Doctor was waiting for her, terror written across her young face. What happened? Demanded, already moving toward her laboratory. I found an error in the third-level harmonic sequence. The resonance patterns are off by 0.003%. Blood turned cold, 0.003%. It sounded like nothing, it was everything. Show me. They worked in frantic silence, pulling up equations whilst mind raced through possibilities. The error was small but deadly, like a single wrong note in a symphony that would cause the entire orchestra to collapse. 40 minutes until the attempt. Here, said suddenly, pointing at a cluster of variables. The phase alignment. It's calculating based on the neutron star's current position, but it needs to account for its movement during the field activation. Can we fix it in time? Was already typing. Her fingers flew across the console, adjusting numbers, rewriting code. Checked each change, verifying, confirming. 20 minutes. Done, transmitted the corrections to the fleet. All ships, update your positioning algorithms. New coordinates incoming. 200 ships received the update. 200 pilots made adjustments. The margin for error shrank even further. On the alien observer vessels, sensors recorded everything. The ambassador, Morning Light, watched with something that might have been hope, if such a thing were possible for one who had lived so long and seen so much fail. 10 minutes. Captain Park addressed the fleet. His voice was calm, steady, the voice of a man who had accepted whatever was about to happen. All ships, this is defiance. You know what we're attempting, you know the risks. Every one of you volunteered for this mission. Every one of you chose to be here right now at this moment. He paused. In a few minutes, we're going to do something that the entire galaxy says is impossible, and we're going to succeed. Not because we're smarter than them, not because our technology is better, but because we're human, and humans don't give up. 5 minutes. Pilot Hand sat in the cockpit of her small vessel, the Swift Crane, positioned at one of the most critical points in the formation. Her hands trembled slightly on the controls. She was 34 years old. She had a daughter back on Earth who was learning to walk. She had promised to come home. All ships, Lieutenant's voice came through, begin final positioning. Tolerance is 10 meters. I repeat, 10 meters. Made an adjustment. Her sensors showed she was 8.3 meters from perfect position. Good enough. No, she nudged the controls again. 8.1, 7.9, 7.7. Swift Crane in position, she reported. 7.7 meters. 2 minutes. Across the fleet, similar reports came in. Captains and pilots, some with decades of experience and some barely out of training, finding their marks with incredible precision. 1 minute. All ships said, activate field generators on my mark. The neutron star rushed toward them, invisible and devastating, carrying enough destructive power to end worlds. 30 seconds. Watched her readouts. The numbers were good. The positions were good. Everything was as close to perfect as humans could make it. 20 seconds. Thought of her daughter. She thought of Earth, blue and green and beautiful. She thought of 3 billion people who would live or die based on what happened in the next few seconds. 10 seconds. Mark. 200 ships fired simultaneously. Energy beams shot inward, meeting at precise points, creating a web of force that existed for exactly 37 seconds. Nothing visible happened. The alien observers checked their instruments, confused. The energy output was minimal, barely enough to power a small city for a day. There was no explosion, no dramatic display. And then the neutron star shimmered. It was there, and then it wasn't. Space itself seemed to fold, to twist, to become something other than space. The deadly mass slipped through the fold like water through a drain, and reappeared 300 light-years away, its trajectory now carrying it into the empty void between galaxies, where it would harm nothing and no one. Silence. Then from the human fleet, a sound that the alien observers had never heard before. Cheering, screaming, crying, laughter. 200 ships full of humans releasing their tension in a flood of pure, overwhelming joy. "We did it," whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We actually did it." Couldn't speak. She sank into her chair and stared at the readouts that confirmed what they had done. The impossible, the unthinkable. But the cheering slowed, stopped, because the reports were coming in now, the damage reports, the casualty lists. 31 ships had not survived. The energy feedback during the field collapse had been too much for their older systems. They had burned where they stood, their crews dying instantly. Pilot Han was among them. Captain Park read the list in silence. 31 ships, 4,847 people. They had volunteered knowing the risk. They had died saving billions they would never meet. The cheering was over, but the mission was complete. 3 billion people would see tomorrow. And humanity had proven something that the galaxy would never forget. Part 4: The Aftermath. The Vela system was alive. On the 4 worlds that should have died, 3 billion people looked up at their skis and wept. They had been told to prepare for the end. They had written farewell letters, held their loved ones close, and waited for death. Instead, they received life, a gift from strangers who lived hundreds of light years away. The surviving human fleet gathered in orbit around the largest planet, Vela Prime. 169 ships remained. 31 empty spaces marked where the others should have been. Captain Park stood alone in his quarters, writing letters. Not reports, not official communications, personal letters written by hand, addressed to families who had lost someone. To the family of Pilot Han, he wrote, "Your daughter, your sister, your mother was a hero. She held her position until the last moment, never wavering, never doubting. Because of her courage, millions of children will grow up on worlds that should have been destroyed. She died so that others could live. There is no greater honor." He wrote 31 letters. Each one took time, each one hurt. Lieutenant found him hours later, still writing. "Captain," said softly, "the Galactic Union has requested our presence. They want to know how we did it." Finished the letter he was working on, sealed it, and added it to the pile. "Tell them we'll be there, but first we honor our dead." The memorial service was held in the space between stars. 169 ships formed a circle, their lights dimmed. At the center floated 31 wreaths of flowers, real flowers, brought from Earth on one of the cargo vessels. The names were read aloud. Each name was followed by silence, 37 seconds of silence, the same amount of time it had taken to save 3 billion lives. Han Park Lee. The names went on, each one a person with a story, a family, a future that would never be. When the service ended, Captain Park spoke. "These were ordinary people," he said, his voice carrying across the fleet. "They were not soldiers. They were not chosen for their bravery. They were scientists and pilots and engineers. They were parents and children and friends. They came here because someone asked for help and they answered." He paused, looking at the wreaths drifting in the void. "The galaxy will remember what we did today. They will study our equations and build monuments to our achievement. But I want you to remember this: what we did was not special. It was not unique to this crew or this fleet. It was simply human. When someone needs help, we help. When the impossible stands in our way, we find a way through. That is who we are. That is who we will always be." 3 days later, the Galactic Union convened a special session. Representatives from all 47 species filled the Great Hall, but the atmosphere was different now. Where there had been pity for the humans, there was now something else: respect, confusion, even fear. Dr. Lee stood at the central platform, a holographic display showing her equations. She looked exhausted but triumphant. "The technique is called spatial folding," she explained. "Instead of applying force to move an object, we create a bubble of altered space around it. The object never actually moves, space moves around it." A scientist pulsed with agitation. "We have reviewed your mathematics. They are correct, but the precision required is beyond any computational system we possess." "You're right," said. "It's beyond any computational system. That's why we didn't use one." The hall fell silent. Doctor stepped forward. The final adjustments during the field activation were made by the ship captains themselves. 200 humans making micro-corrections in real time based on their training and their instincts. "Instincts?" The ambassador, Morning Light, sounded genuinely confused. "You trusted the fate of 3 billion people to feelings." Ambassador answered, "We trusted it to each other." The debate that followed lasted for hours. The alien scientists could not accept what they had witnessed. Instinct was not measurable. Trust was not quantifiable. How could such uncertain things succeed where their superior technology had failed? Finally, an ancient philosopher spoke. His species rarely attended such meetings. They preferred contemplation to action. But today, he had something to say. "I have lived for 4,000 years, he said, his mandibles clicking slowly. "I have watched many young species join the Union, Most of them learn to accept limits, they grow cautious, they calculate probability and act only when success is certain. He turned his many eyes toward the human delegation. Humans do not do this. They act when success is possible, when it is unlikely, even when it appears impossible. This is not foolishness. This is something else, something we have forgotten. He paused. Perhaps they are teaching us to remember. In the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened. The people of the Vela system wanted to meet the humans who had saved them. Delegations traveled from all 4 worlds, bringing gifts, artwork, music, food, and words of gratitude in 100 languages. A young child, barely more than a swirling cloud of colored gas, approached Captain Park during one such meeting. "Are you the captain?" the child asked through a translator. "I am. My parents said you saved us. They said you came from very far away and you didn't know us, but you saved us anyway." The child's form flickered with what had learned to recognize as emotion. Why? Knelt down to the child's level. Because everyone deserves to be saved, even strangers, even people we'll never meet again. "But some of your people died." "Yes, they did." "Were they scared?" Thought of Han, of all the pilots and crew who had known the risks and come anyway. "I think they were, but they came anyway, because being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave. It just means you have to try harder." The child was quiet for a moment, then its form pulsed with warmth. "I want to be like that someday. I want to be brave even when I'm scared." "Then you already are," said. "You just have to remember it." The child floated away, back to its parents who bowed deeply to the human captain. Watched them go, feeling the weight of the letters still waiting to be delivered, the empty chairs in his crew quarters, the spaces in the formation where 31 ships should have been. They had won. They had done the impossible, but victory had cost them dearly. He hoped it was enough. Part 5. The New Understanding. 6 months had passed since the impossible day. The galaxy had changed. Not dramatically, not overnight, but in small ways that would grow larger with time. The story of the human fleet had spread to every corner of known space. Children on 100 worlds played games where they pretended to be the brave pilots who held their positions against death. Scientists studied Dr. Lee's equations and argued about what other impossibilities might become possible. And on Earth, the ambassador Morning Light walked among humans for the first time. She had requested permission to visit the human, not as a diplomat, not for official business. She simply wanted to understand. How had these brief, fragile creatures done what ancient civilizations could not? Her guide was a young man named Shin, an assistant at the Earth Cultural Exchange. He was nervous at first, walking beside a being made of living crystal, but Morning Light's gentle questions soon put him at ease. "Tell me about your city," she said as they walked through Seoul. The streets were crowded with people rushing to work, to school, to lives full of small urgencies. "It's normal," said, unsure what she wanted to hear. "People live here. They work, they eat, they sleep. There's nothing special about it." "You say that, but I see something different." Morning Light pointed at a small park where an elderly woman was feeding birds. "That woman has nothing to gain from feeding those creatures. Why does she do it?" "Because she enjoys it, because the birds are hungry." "But she has never met these birds before. They are strangers to her." Laugh softly. "That's not how humans think. The birds are hungry, she has food, so she feeds them. It's simple." Morning Light was quiet for a long moment. "Simple," she repeated. "Yes, perhaps it is." They continued walking. Morning Light saw a child fall from a bicycle, scraping her knee. Within seconds, 7 people had stopped, strangers, all of them, checking on the child, offering bandages, calling her parents, comforting her with gentle words. "They don't know that child," Morning Light observed. "No, but she needed help." "So they helped?" "Yes." The ambassador stood very still, her crystalline form catching the sunlight in ways that made stop and stare. She was processing something, trying to fit human behavior into a framework that had been built over 100,000 years. "My people," she said finally, "we calculate everything. We measure the cost of action against the probability of success. We ask ourselves, what do we gain? What do we risk? And if the numbers do not favor us, we do not act." "That seems reasonable," said carefully. "It is reasonable. It is logical. It has served us well for longer than your species has existed." She turned to look at him directly. "But we never would have saved the Vela system. We calculated the odds. We accepted the loss. We prepared for death." "And we didn't." "You didn't. You saw the numbers, the same numbers we saw, and you said, 'We've got this.' As if the numbers did not matter. As if the impossible was just another problem to solve." Thought about this. He was not a scientist or a philosopher. He was just a young man who helped foreign visitors understand his world. But he had grown up with stories of human achievement, of people who refused to accept limits. "Maybe," he said slowly, "we just haven't learned to give up yet. We're young. We haven't seen enough failure to know when to stop trying." "You think you will learn?" "I hope not." Morning light made a sound that might have been laughter. "I hope not too." Far across the galaxy, Captain Park sat in his quarters aboard the Defiance, reading a message. The Galactic Union had voted, unanimously, for the first time in 3,000 years, to offer humanity a seat on the Emergency Response Council. It was an honor never before given to a species so young. But that was not what made Smile. The message was from the child he had met on Vela Prime. The young cloud of consciousness had learned to write in human language, and the letter was simple. "Captain Park, I am learning to be brave. I told my parent that I want to help people when I grow up, even strangers, even people I will never meet. They said this is a human idea. I said it is a good idea. Thank you for teaching me." Filed the letter with his most treasured possessions, and went to the bridge. Dr. Lee was there, reviewing new research proposals. In the months since their success, 7 other species had begun developing their own versions of spatial folding technology, had published her complete theoretical framework, free for anyone to use. "You could have patented it," Lieutenant had said. "You'd be the richest person in the galaxy." Had shrugged. "Knowledge should be a gift, not a weapon. Besides, I didn't figure this out alone. I had help from thousands of researchers across human space. It wouldn't be right to profit from their work." Now she looked up as entered. "Captain, anything interesting?" "The usual: meetings, reports, requests for interviews." He took his seat. "Also, Lieutenant has been promoted." Standing at his station, straightened in surprise. "Sir." "Captain now, they're giving you your own ship," smiled. "You've earned it." "I thank you, sir, but who will coordinate the fleet?" "I'm sure we'll find someone. Humans are good at stepping up when they're needed." The bridge fell into comfortable silence. Through the windows, stars burned in the eternal darkness, each one a possible destination, a possible adventure, a possible crisis waiting for someone brave enough to help. A communication signal broke the quiet. Captain answered it. "Defiance, this is Galactic Union Emergency Relay. We're receiving a distress call from a colony ship. Their engines have failed. They're drifting toward a black hole. Estimated time until event horizon, 72 hours. Stood, how many people on board?" 12,000. The Union says extraction is impossible. Their ships can't reach the colony vessel in time. The bridge crew looked at their captain. They knew what was coming. They had heard these words before. Captain Park adjusted his uniform, straightened his shoulders, and opened the channel to the distressed ship. "Colony vessel, this is Captain Park of the human fleet. Hold your position. Help is coming." A trembling voice answered. "You cannot reach us in time, the Union has said." "The Union gave up. We haven't," smiled. "We've got this." He closed the channel and turned to his crew. "You heard them, 12,000 people waiting for rescue. Let's get to work. The Defiance turned toward the distant stars, engines burning bright. Behind it, other human ships followed, answering the call as they always did, as they always would. The galaxy was watching, and humanity was teaching them something they had forgotten long ago, that hope was not foolishness, that trying was not weakness, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the impossible was simply waiting for someone brave enough to attempt it. This was the human way, and the stars had never seemed brighter.